Victor Perton for the Australian Leadership Project. Today, we're honoured to be joined by one of Australia's leading non-executive directors, Stuart Allinson, who shares his experience and insights into Australian leadership. Well, look, it's a wonderful day again for the Australian Leadership Project. We're joined by Stuart Allinson. Stuart is a non-executive director on some of Australia's leading organisations, an expert in disruptive technology, in climate, and helping make sense of that for Australian organisations and for Australia itself. Welcome, Stuart.
Victor, good morning. Thank you.
Stuart, the first question we ask everyone who participates in the Australian Leadership Project, tell us your favourite story of an Australian leader, maybe a boss that you've had.
Yeah, I need to thread that to a couple of things because, as you can tell by my accent, I'm a more recent arrival to these shores. So I came from the UK. A lot of my early experience was in the oil and gas industry. And I reflected on my boss then as a gentleman called John Treen. I'm sure he won't be too embarrassed to be mentioned. And what stood out for me was his willingness always to listen, to give me advice that was broader than just the immediate situation and just really be on call. And I've always found that to be a great thing all the way through my career. When I came to Australia, I had the privilege to work with a number of people, and I'm going to leave some people out, and I'll be embarrassed for having done that, but one or two or three stand out for me. One was a gentleman called Ivan St. Clair, who was my partner and boss at Ernst & Young. And again, that idea of having a go, seeing a bigger picture, being able to really talk in practical sense as well as having the real smarts around it. Other examples of that, Peter Edwards, part of the Victor Smorgon Group, one of the brightest engineers and businessmen I've ever met. Philip Toyne, who sadly departed this world, but was just a great mentor for me in the environmental space. I'm sure there's a couple more and I could go on, but those really stood out for me.
And some of those people I've known myself, just superb people. Can we ask you, I mean, given that you've lived in a number of places, you're a migrant to Australia, what do you see as the unique qualities of Australian leadership?
Yeah, well, and nice to frame it that way, because to me, there's some universal qualities about leadership to me. And for me, that's really about that situational awareness. Just being able to coach people at times, being able to lead by example. I think those are universals. The thing that really hits me about Australia, and it's a sort of awakening for me over what's been a 20-year journey, is really what's going on with Australian leadership. At its greatest potential, Australians make the connection between their role and just the vastness of this continent, the big blue skies, which for me translates into endless possibility, which leads to optimism. But it's also that idea of having a go. It's a country that doesn't judge too readily. It lets people just think of the possibilities and get on with it. Great Australian leaders encourage others to back themselves in that environment.
Oh, what a great analysis. Thanks for that, Stuart. Stuart, one of the things that started the Australian Leadership Project was really trying to understand what Australians want of leadership in these times. So what do you believe Australians want of their leaders today?
Yeah, it's one view, and it's a thorny one, because we live in, times of massive change. People talk about disruption. I deal with disruption. There's always been disruption. Disruption's as old as humanity and civilization, but the massive pace and just sheer breadth of change going on at the minute. So the cut through then for me in terms of Australian leadership, which then goes across politics and business and society, right across, I think there's three or four things. I think the first thing is clarity. Just clarity of thought. There's nothing better than a great mind that can analyze a situation and work it through. And for me, you can respect clarity even if you disagree with the analysis and or the conclusions. So once you appreciate that, it doesn't matter which side of the debate you put on, you can respect that. The second thing for me is empathy, and people fall into the trap of thinking empathy is just agreeing with people all the time. I think it's being attuned to the other person's perspective, acknowledging it, but you don't necessarily have to agree with it, which again comes back to respect. I think the other aspect is about being willing to debate. There's something about transparency, which is about being able to set out your stall, lay out your arguments for being answerable to that, and then being prepared to adjust your view in the light of different perspectives and different information that's compelling. Now, in a way, that sort of undermines the idea of strong, decisive, command and control type leadership, but I think it's more suited to the times. There's times when you've got to lead, there's times when you've got to listen. There's also times when you've got to know whether you're coaching or whether you're leading, and I think that's my final point. That's real leaders know that situation and how to deal with it.
Stuart, I think that's one of the best answers we've had to that question. So thank you for that. Our fourth question is perhaps a little more personal, and that is, who've been the leaders in your life? Who's inspired you, Stuart?
Yeah, I've probably referred to some of that leadership points in the earlier. You can't reflect on life without also reflecting on your own upbringing, your own parents. And my folks, it's probably one of the reasons why I'm here. Not that they said go and live in Australia, but I was brought up always believing and being taught that there was a bigger picture. There was always a bigger possibility out there. And that came directly from my parents. So that's kind of the fundamental inspiration. I did take my grandkids away from the grandparents, and that did cause a bit of reflection there, but I'm hanging on to that idea that your folks are there to help you stand on your own 2 feet and then go find the world of possibilities, go discover, and that's one of the reasons I'm here. I think beyond that, inspirations, I think you look for inspiration. You can't go past Australian culture without talking Australian football. I had the privilege of meeting Kevin Sheedy a couple of months off the plane back in late 90s. And I just found he was one of those bigger picture guys. He's just been inducted into the Hall of Fame as a legend. But, he did massive amounts for Indigenous participation in football. He sees the game of football as a much bigger thing, and able to operate on a world benchmark and increasingly an international stage. So he's a bit of a standout in the sporting area for me.
It was great watching him walk with the Prime Minister on the long walk on Saturday night before the Indigenous round between Richmond and Essendon. And he's still as lively and cheerful and inspiring as ever. So, Kevin's fantastic.
Well, words and deeds, I mean, he's never short of a word, but you just look at what he's done and his step out into Great Western Sydney, the long walk. I met a friend of ours who's attached to a local school here, taking their kids up Bayside on to participate in the long walk and to join in at the MCG. So, you can trace all of that back to Kevin Sheedy. Michael Long deserves a huge mention in that. Sadly, he wasn't able to be there. I think he's not so well at the minute. But, that's the inspiration that's just got a huge legacy to it.
And like you, a global thinker. I served on the Foreign Ministers' Council on Australian Latin American relations. And, Kevin Sheedy, was again looking, can we expand the game to Latin America? So, like you, a genuinely global thinker.
Well, if he stays involved, we will be able to, huh?
Now, you're an optimist. I mean, that's clear. People who migrate to other countries, it's almost the essence of optimism. So what makes you so optimistic, and what's your case for optimism?
Great. It comes down to this, I think, Victor. You can choose to be optimistic, or you can choose to be pessimistic, and both and either are self-fulfilling prophecies. So the problem with being pessimistic is that self-fulfilling prophecy. If you think the world's got nowhere to go, then that's what you'll conclude. We talk a little bit about whether people are lucky or not. I think people just get dealt a hand, and it's the way you deal with it. I think optimistic people are lucky, no more, no less than anybody else in the world. Just that they're open to the possibilities that I think exist every day of the week. My simple example of it: you can walk down Collins Street or George Street, and you can look at the floor, or you can look around thinking, I wonder who I might bump into today that I haven't seen for a while. And I think it's just that disposition, that outlook, that is self-fulfilling and ultimately rewarding. In my area, one of my areas in environmentalism, to me, it's essential. You have to believe that there are solutions out there. We're starting to see massive technological advancement that do solve some of the world's problems. I find, and my characterization of it is, optimism is that path that often gets sandwiched between alarmism on the one hand and denialism on the other. And in environmental areas, those two extremes can both and each trigger the freeze response, i.e., it's all too hard, let's do nothing. Optimism gives us a mindset to take a path forward towards solutions.
That's brilliantly put. I sometimes just say that pessimism leads to paralysis. And I think what's interesting in the climate area is, if you listen to Al Gore, for instance, or Christina Figueres, who's now set up Climate Optimism, is that they're really selling an optimistic message to make sure that people are going to take action and know that they can do things.
I think this is really key, that, there's an analogy here, or a parallel actually, with smoking. If you look at the way smoking advertising has been going over the first X years of its pathway, it was, if you do this, you'll lose time at the end of your life. And it's too far in the distance for most people to grasp a hold of. It's rare that someone presented with an environmental problem that affects their grandkids will adjust behavior now. I think we get that in the farming community. I think the farming community thinks in terms of succession and longevity. But that message on smoking has changed to, hey, if you reduce smoking or stop smoking, you'll feel health benefits very, very quickly. I think there's something about, in the environmental sector, of showing the possibilities by the more immediate impacts of change.
Well, Stuart, look, thank you so much for joining us today. Your work is an inspiration, and talking to you today, I mean, you're a walking model of good leadership and great wisdom about leadership. So thanks for joining the Australian Leadership Project today.
Absolute pleasure, Victor. You have a great day.
Thank you. Well, that's a huge thank you to Stuart. And if you'd like to see more of our interviews and read more, go to our website at australianleadership.com. And if you'd like to share your wisdom, or think we should be interviewing someone else in particular, again, go to that website, and at the bottom of each interview, there's our form and our feedback opportunities. Have a great day and lead with optimism.